Okay, we got a simple question for you. Really simple. Which of these three lines is longest? Line A, line B,
or line C?
Now, you're going, come on, give me a break. I can easily see it's line A.
Which line is longest?
Is this a trick question?
Which line's the longest?
A? Is it A?
A?
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. How, does anyone get that wrong?
Line A. Okay.
If you more, not you realize it's A.
It is line A, but what if I told you we could spend some time and arrange a circumstance in which you began to feel very doubtful of that fact. In fact, you might begin to say, I think it might be line C, maybe even line B, the shortest line, obviously. But what if I told you we could put you in a condition, into a situation socially, where you would be convinced that, yeah, maybe I don't know which line is the longest. Well, we could, at least for a lot of you.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that about yourself. But in the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch did a fascinating study, which, by the way, has been replicated many times since. He actually discovered when he got a group of people together, coached everyone but one person in the study, showed them these lines, and most of them, all but one, had been coached to respond to the lines by selecting the line that wasn't the longest as the right answer.
Right, all these Confederates, they're in on the experiment.
Exactly.
Everybody but one guy.
The poor one guy, he could actually persuade the one person who accurately perceived the longest line to change their answer so they could belong to the group, which obviously all said the wrong answer.
A third to a half of that group that's put in there, not knowing that they're the stooge in the group, a third to a half of them will eventually say, yeah, I agree with everybody else. And they begin to really believe that.
Yeah, because it's such a powerful need we have to fit in and belong. It's a compulsion we feel.
We have this longing for belonging, and as you'll see, it stems from what we call your compulsion for completion. That little experiment illustrates how we can buy into lies that we know deep down aren't true, but we begin to think maybe there's something to this.
Yeah, because of our need for good relationships.
And if you've read the chapter for this session, we highlight two of those specific lies. One is, I need this person to be complete. Wow, when you buy into that, you're really setting yourself up for failure in a relationship.
Well, and heartache, because what you're saying is, I've got gaps in me that I really believe you can fill.
Right.
And if I just get attached to you, I will be whole.
Yeah, you become my shortcut to personal growth and well-being, completeness, wholeness.
Exactly.
All that kind of thing.
And it looks good on the surface, but it's a lie.
And then the second lie we highlight in the chapter is, if this person needs me, I'll be complete. Also, just as faulty.
Very powerful, though, too. Some of us have this drive to become indispensable to someone, and if they need us desperately in order to be whole, then we feel like we've got worth and value, and that makes us complete.
You know, some years ago, Leslie and I thought, we teach on our college campus where we work in Seattle. We as a faculty are teaching these students everything in the world except how to have healthy relationships.
Yeah, all kinds of life skills, but not the skills for what matters most in life.
So why not offer a class in relationships? We thought, let's teach a class. We'll call it Relationships 101. Now, if you know anything about academic settings, you know you don't just dream up a course and begin to teach it.
There's a process.
You got to get it approved by the provost, the dean, and the committees and all that. So we put a little proposal together with all the stuff we want to teach on relationships. This group kind of looked it over for a little while and finally looked up at us and said, thanks, but no thanks. We said, why not? We thought this would be such a practical class. And
we didn't give up, though. We took it back, retooled it, and proposed it again.
Came back a few months later and said, take a look at this. And again, thanks, but no thanks. We went through this 3 times in a row, and finally, I think we kind of wore them down.
Sure, they gave in. They wanted to get rid of us,
On the third round, they finally just said, okay, we're going to let you teach this class, but only under these conditions.
And they had all kinds of things. I mean, we had to teach it on top of our full-time jobs.
As an overload.
Couldn't be required for anyone's major, and they also couldn't be graded. Needed to be a pass-fail.
You had to find a classroom that was open when others weren't being used and so forth. And anyway, and without pay. Remember that one?
Sure.
They said you need to
I
teach
remember
it.
that one. Yeah.
So they finally said, we'll let you teach it. If you want to teach it so bad, go ahead and do it under these conditions.
And we were thrilled with that.
We did.
Yeah.
We found a classroom, 7 p.m., Monday evenings, on a undergraduate university campus to teach this class. We put the description in the catalog, just hope we might fill up these chairs. We had 12 chairs in the room. Maybe we could even get going with half the chairs filled. At least
Yeah,
we'll
we'd be
on our
excited
way.
with anyone.
Well, first day of registration, about 10 o'clock in the morning. The registrar calls my office. He says, "Hey, Doc, we're going to have to move your classroom." Why? Nobody signed up. You need it for something else? He said, "No." He said, "We just realized you didn't limit the class. You didn't, put a number in not to exceed." I said, well, what does that have to do with anything? He said, 250 students have signed up for the class. I said, "You're kidding me."
Well, that was such great news for
Yeah.
us. We loved it that there was such a hunger for learning about how to have great
And
relationships.
so the class moved into the auditorium that was open that night, and we've been teaching that class ever since, going on 15 years or so. And on the very first night of this class, we always begin by telling our students, it doesn't matter to us whether you take any notes.
Right.
There's no pop quiz, there's no midterm. You're going to get out of this experience whatever it is that you'd like to. Except tonight, we want you to write down on the very first night of this class one single sentence. And we tell them this sentence that we're about to give you, it has the power to revolutionize every relationship you ever attempt to build. Whether it's with mom and dad, with your siblings, with, a friend, a roommate. Soulmate, whoever. And they get poised with their pencils, and finally we give them the sentence, and here it is. If you try to build intimacy, if you try to build a connection with another person, before you've done the difficult work of getting whole or getting healthy on your own, all your relationships become an attempt to complete yourself. And they'll fall flat. Guaranteed. Why? Because nobody was designed to complete you. And this gets at the biggest lie of all,
That's
right?
right.
This
That
compulsion
someone
for completion.
else can make you whole.
Right. It doesn't work that way. And we buy into this. And in fact, you've seen since you were a little kid, you've been reading the fairy tales, and as adults, we see the movies. We sometimes call this kind of the Jerry Maguire syndrome, right?
So powerful.
You complete me.
You complete me.
You complete me.
You complete me? Completely, Michael.
Ever heard that romantic line?
Yeah. And so we buy into this myth
Yeah.
that says this person is going to complete me, or I'm not going to be complete unless this person
Unless they
needs-
need me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Growing up, I've always felt like there's something missing, or I'd always try to find relationships that would make me feel whole or make me feel better about myself. And knowing that when you're going into relationships and knowing that you have that compulsion, you can be able to fill that with something else other than expecting your loved ones or your friends or the person you're trying to date to try to fill that, knowing that that's not possible and knowing that it doesn't come from a human being.
I actually think it makes sense in a relationship. I think a lot of times people go into a relationship because they feel like the other person just completely understands their personality, or they're always happy with them, and they just don't know how else to be whenever they're not with them.
More often than not, I fall into the camp of I need this person to be complete.
You don't have to have somebody to be complete, but you can be complete by yourself.
And I feel like by completing myself and knowing who I am, I can relate to other people better, and especially when dealing with struggles and problems and things of that sort.
You complete me. I feel like that's kind of superficial in a sense. I feel like people really need to understand who they are first as a person, and then complete it with, being with somebody. But as two whole people, I don't feel like if you really jump in a relationship thinking that person's going to complete all the parts of you, then when you break up, then what do you have left? You're missing an entire section of, who you're supposed to be with that person.
So that's why we devote this very first session to you, your relationship with you. Nobody can kind of check that off their to-do list and go, hey, I'm healthy, I'm complete, I'm done. We're all in process, and we help each other in our relationships just as iron sharpens iron.
Right.
We can help each other do this. But ultimately, the compulsion for completion comes down to you and, as a person of faith, your relationship with God.
Right.
In fact, what you'll discover in this series with us, as we move along session to session, looking at friendship, looking at love and family and so forth, we're going to circle back around to this whole idea when we get to the last session with you and talk about relating to God without feeling phony, because that's ultimately where we find our compulsion for completion. All right, you guys, with each one of these 6 sessions, we're going to point you to an exercise in your workbook to really draw you in personally.
Yeah, we want you not to just have an insight, but we want you to apply it to your own self.
So the first one, there's actually 2 in this first session, and the first one is an online little assessment. It'll take you less than 10 minutes. Maybe you've already done that and you've brought it here to your first session. If not, we hope you'll do it for next week's session together. Go online to smallgroupinsights.com. You can purchase a code for a minimal fee. You may already have a code if you received the book. And this will give you a little report, about 10 pages, on your personal group style. Trust me, this will be an eye-opener for you as well as the people in your group. It has a 3-step exercise that you'll walk through together.
Yeah, it really enhances the interactions you'll have and the growth you'll have as a result
It'll
of
help
that.
you all engage, be authentic, a bit more vulnerable, and healthy as a group together in this community.
Well, and I love the word authentic because the second exercise we'd like you to do after this session is called taking off your masks. And this is an exercise you'll find in your workbook, and it really helps you to look at some of the personas that maybe you put on to protect yourself and, you know, to really lean on instead of having genuine relationships.
So don't just sit back and observe the experience as a group member. Really get involved, apply this content to your life, and we'll see you on the next session.